Adrian Pratt, and this is Calcutta, Adda. Today we're going to be talking about College Street and the Indian Coffee House, two of the most wonderful places. College Street is known for its fabulous institutes of higher learning, and over the years, hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, of bookstalls and bookstores have sprung up around these colleges and universities. You're literally surrounded by books everywhere you look. For a book lover such as me, you can really get lost on College Street. And right in the heart of College Street stands the Indian Coffee House. Now, for decades, that's been a place filled with conversation, with Adda, with discussions, with politics, with revolutions even. It's a place where time stands still, almost literally, because when you walk in there, it's as if you're going back to the 1950s or 60s. I don't think the decor has changed since then, but also metaphorically, because the waiters take their sweet time to get to you. And once they do, you can stay in your chair and at your table for as long as you want, well past that one coffee. So people spend hours in there just talking about poetry and politics and any ideas that are of currency during the day. Here, Nobel Prize laureates have hung out, as have famous movie directors and penniless poets. It's always been a place where people of all stations meet to discuss and argue about the ideas of the day. I'm going to be talking today with Shurjo Sen. He is a Bengali, but he's living in Maryland at the moment. He's a program director at the National Human Genome Research Institute. And like me, he's a fellow who absolutely loves College Street and the Indian Coffee House. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Shurjo. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure's all mine, Adrian.
I am so glad that you are able to talk to me about one of my favorite places in Calcutta, College Street, and in particular, the Indian coffee shop there, coffee house there. It is truly one of the most remarkable and unique places in all of the world, as far as I'm concerned. But I was hoping that perhaps you might be able to paint a picture for somebody who has never been to College Street and the coffee house, just what it looks like, what it feels like, and why it is so important and so wonderful.
Of course, Adrian, of course. So I guess the first thing that comes to mind, and it is a bit of a cliche, but it is so true, is if you've never been there, imagine a street where if you look to your left and you look to your right and you look upwards and downwards, most of what you see will be books. It's books and books and books, small bookstores, big bookstores, people reading books, buying books, negotiating prices over books. This place is, I used to walk from the metro station to my college every day, and God knows I must have passed 100 bookstores before I even entered my college. So this is book lover central. The other way to describe it is this is also an extremely busy street. It's not just bookstores and books, but it's also hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people every day, some passing by, some talking to booksellers, some just looking over books they just bought. So this is a place with a lot of people, a lot of books, some excellent food, a lot of old buildings, but it has a vibe that is all its own, that goes beyond just the books and just the food. It has a feel, an atmosphere that is hard to put in words, but I hope over our conversation I might try to do it at least.
So you have captured it very well, but College Street also became synonymous with the intellectual life of Bengal. From way back through the Swadeshi, through the independence movement, through the Naxalite movements. Why did it become so central to that kind of intellectual life that is so vibrant in Bengal?
That's a wonderful question, Adrian. I guess we could approach it from a few different perspectives. I mean, it goes without saying that it is a neighborhood that has a lot of really old educational institutions, the Sanskrit College, Presidency College, the Calcutta Medical College. I could probably hair school. So there is, not by coincidence, I suppose, but there are a large number of places where the intellectuals of the time, going back almost 200 years, I would suppose, would have been there by virtue of them being students or professors or teachers. So there's really a historical architectural link that in some ways predates the independence movement as to why this neighborhood is, the brainy part of Calcutta, one might say. But later on, I suppose when you have a city inhabited by a people that are historically prone to intellectual pursuits, and you have booksellers selling books, it almost makes a natural meeting of minds, you would say. People that wanted to read and learn more gravitated there. Some of these bookstores, I believe, are well, my grandfather, who was also a student at the same college, I know was friends with one of the older bookstore families, and he was a student there in the 1930s. So this means there must have been bookstores on College Street going back at least to the early 1900s, maybe even older. I'm actually pretty sure some of them are older. So it's just a mix of, I would say, commercial circumstances where booksellers converged on a particular locality, the ethos of a people that love reading books, architectural, educational institutions being located along that street, many different things all at the same time. Also, this is the northern parts of Calcutta where life moves a little slower and people actually sit down and read books rather than just buy them.
And many of the bookstores are not actual sort of shops; they are stands, right? I
Yeah.
gather in 2020, just before I came to Calcutta, the cyclone Amphan came through and flooded northern Calcutta, and I believe College Street received 3 or 4 feet of water, and there's these
Hmm.
heartbreaking
Hmm.
sights of books just floating down the street. But in true Calcutta style, people came together to try and salvage the situation and raise money for the booksellers. Um, and that to me is such a pure Calcutta story.
It's so here's a minor prelude. I mean, that cyclone was tragic, and the stores took a much bigger hit than I think any of them had taken before. But even before the cyclone, when I used to go to college every day, so that part of the city does accumulate water whenever it rains heavily. So you may have noticed that some of these stalls, for lack of a better word, they're very small. They,
Mm.
like you said, they may not even qualify as shops in the built-up sense, but some of these are raised a few feet off the ground because on any given monsoon season, they might get a little bit of water. The books are usually stacked a little higher up. At the end of the day, you'll see them pick up the books and put them on higher shelves. But yeah, that was tragic. I can't imagine that these people had a lot of financial security to begin with. This also happened when I had come to the US and had lived here for many years. I like to believe that the government or whoever it is helped them get over that times. But it did survive. I mean, I was just back there a month ago and it seems to be just as thriving as I remember it 25 years ago.
That's wonderful. I one of my favorite remembrances of College Street was I went into some dusty bookstore, and it literally, I mean, it's called the Boi Bara, right? The book
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood. And I'm a book lover, and I went into this place on the off chance of purchasing quite an obscure book of history about Calcutta. And I spoke to the guy behind the shelf, and I gave him this name and thought, there's no way in hell he's going to find it. But off he scuttled, moved the
Mm-hmm.
shelf around,
Mm-hmm.
went up a ladder, and immediately came back with this dusty
Yeah,
colored book.
yeah.
And it was quite one of the most lovely and amazing things.
That to me, in hindsight, so thank you for that story because when I used to go there every day, had he not found it in his store, I guess you know the chances are very high that within maybe half an hour, pretty much every store on that street would have been tapped to see if they had it. And these are people, let's put this in a nice way, even if they're not reading advanced histories of Bengal, they know these books by name and they carry these absolutely magic indexes of everything in their store or the store next to them. So it's like a human library catalog multiplied 100 times over, or whatever number of store owners there are. But they can find any book there is, or their neighbor has it, or their neighbor has it. It's mind blowing to see how quickly they can locate,
Right.
as you
And with
said, very obscure books.
no computers, no
No
index
computers, no.
files. It's all up here.
Yep, yep.
But also, I mean, during the sort of the independence movement, the bookstores were sort of part of that, right? I mean, they would use books to smuggle pamphlets and
Hmm.
information to people, and I suppose there was just so many stores that the Brits just couldn't get a handle on all of what was going on.
It was also presses. I know we think of books as being, books are the most common thing you see there, but the other thing I realized is in these tiny little basements, sometimes almost next to the bookstores, you have one person with a very old printing press that can crank out pamphlets. I mean, these pamphlets persisted up until the late 90s when I was a student. So I can totally see the independence movement kind of feeding off that industry of quick and clandestine production of printed material used to rouse nationalist feelings.
Right. And it wasn't just the independence movement. I mean, I think in the 60s and the 70s, the
Yeah,
Naxalite movement,
yeah,
that was sort of feverish on College
yeah,
Street, and
yeah.
that involved a lot of the students, right?
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Also, very violent times. Of course, I came to that neighborhood 20 years after the bombs and the killings, but I do have a network of people that were students there during the 60s and 70s. And they said that despite the killings, despite the violence, the bookstores, the college was closed for, I believe, my college, Presidency College, was closed for almost a year, if I'm not wrong. But the bookstores never closed. They kept going all through that business.
So now take me, you've described beautifully the bookstores, but take me up those stairs into the Indian coffee house. And
Coffee
again,
house.
describe it for
Yeah.
somebody who's not been there, because this is not Starbucks, right?
No, 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 no. Well, first we would have to stop at the bottom of the stairs and buy a cigarette from shop on my. I'm going to find that picture for you, but the cigarette seller at the basement was my best friend ever.
Oh, what was
Yeah,
send
yeah,
me the picture. We'll put this
yeah,
up.
yeah. I'll put it up. But he had this absolutely lovely ability to smile under any and all circumstances. I feel bad. I should have met him on this trip. But anyhow, there we enter that building, obviously old, not in the best of shape, but on the very basement, right as you climb the first stairs, you have this tiny store, always busy with people buying one cigarette or two cigarettes. And he had a payphone back in the day. I used it to call my girlfriends. But anyhow, so then you climb up these stairs, you enter this space that has, I think, like 50-foot ceilings or something. Very, very high ceilings, a balcony going up the second floor. And you see these men wearing turbans and cummerbunds and dressed quite colonially, I would say.
Yeah.
And then you end up expecting a rather fancy place, but then you look around you and the people are clearly not what you would call members of the colonial elite. uh, and so yeah, there you have groups of people discussing pretty much any topic there is to discuss, and as Bengalis we can push that boundary to its limits. But you've probably heard the most obvious features. You could buy one cup of coffee and not be kicked out of that place for 4 hours. The coffee, Starbucks is not my favorite coffee place. I like to think that Indian coffee house, or just coffee house as we call it, actually had better coffee than Starbucks. But it was cheap, and if you bought a cup, you were good for a couple of hours. And God knows how many romances started there that are now marriages with babies and grandchildren.
And people stay there despite the rather rickety furniture. I mean, the seats are all plastic, and I mean, there's not
The
much money spent on decor.
yes, and my mother, who used to go there much more than I did when she was at the University of Calcutta, tells me that there was a time when the chairs were better. I, I'm informed that it wasn't always as shabby as it was when I went. It was never what you would call a five-star hotel, but I believe there was a time when it actually had sturdy wooden chairs. But it was still the same. People just stayed for hours and talked about anything and everything.
Yeah,
And then, of course, we have the song, which I think you've heard about.
yeah. Tell us about the song because I'll play a little extract of it a little bit later in this conversation.
Hmm.
I mean, as soon as I mentioned coffee house and song, your face lit up and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
started
yeah, yeah,
giggling.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Coffee House, the song, of course, the Bengali Coffee House is say Adda aaj aar nahi. The long and rambling discussion we had at Coffee House no longer exists, if you want the literal translation. Sung by Manna De, one of my favorite singers, a classically trained, fantastic voice, all around good singer. A song that I would not be surprised if is either from the late 60s, early 70s, maybe 60s, more 60s than 70s, definitely not 50s at least. So anyhow, it tells the story of a group of friends who are from extremely disparate backgrounds, who all gather once a week at coffee house with very set times. I'm going to be able to tell you exactly when they met and when they had a fixed time to this weekly chat. But the point of the song is they all lived for it, and it was the high point of their week. And despite the fact that they were all from extremely different backgrounds, they all got together, and for those 3 hours or so, they forgot all their differences, and all they talked about was art and cinema and sculpture. And I don't know if the song specifically talks about Naxalites or class differences, but it is basically a melancholic song talking about a group of mostly men with one woman. Life has not been kind to most of these people at the time the narrator sings the song. He is going back in time 20 or 30 years, and feeling sad about the fact that most people, let me count them off. The Goanese guitarist is dead. One other character has cancer. I think one is a starving poet in Paris. But you can see where this goes. None of the men have what you would call charming, happy. Yeah, they're all a little screwed one way or the other.
Right,
And then,
right.
of course, as I was saying, the misogynistic part of it is then he calls out the woman, Shujata, her name, and then calls out how wonderful she is because she has a big house and fancy jewelry. But why? Because she married a rich husband.
Hmm. Yeah, that would not fly these days.
Yeah, well, not for me to judge a song that is 50 or 60 years old. It was probably fine for its place and time. But it is a very Bengali song. We are a melancholy people. We love old times. We are prone to nostalgia. So it's a lovely song. It's actually quite a catchy song, just on the musical merits alone, a very hummable tune.
But
But I doubt that the Bengali young man of the 2020s has much of those same egalitarian characteristics
uh,
that this song
but
talks about.
the first time I walked into that place, it hit me physically. It was as if I'd been transported back in time, and everything slowed down. Conversation was king. Nobody was on their phones. There was nobody listening to music. People were there to interact with one another and to have
Hmm.
stories.
Hmm.
And again, being an American and perhaps being used to Starbucks, I sat down and, these ancient waiters and their turbans and their starched white uniforms couldn't give a damn that I was there. They were going to get to me when they were good and ready.
There's seen too many like you, Adrian. Not, not to make you feel unimportant, but
Well, it wasn't
the,
unimportant. It was just that, I perhaps didn't have 4 hours to wait around for a coffee, but
they couldn't care less.
nope. And
No,
that was so special because it
yeah.
slowed everything down. And, the coffee, when it eventually came, probably tasted a little better because of the wait and because of the wonderful attitude of the
Did
waiters.
you find a table or did you have to?
Yeah,
How
we
long
did.
did you have to wait before you were seated?
We it was bizarre. We were very lucky because there's a whole bunch of people upstairs, and that was all full.
Hmm.
But we just walked in, and somebody had just left, and but it
You got
worked.
lucky.
Yeah, we got very lucky.
Hmm.
But there are also, going along with that song, there are some very famous patrons who went there. I mean, Nobel Prize winners, Amartya Sen and Satyajit Ray went there, and I mean the walls are filled with stories, right?
Hmm. 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 I mean, I think what I find charming is that at this, not in my time, or the people that I went there with have not yet won Nobel Prizes. But I like to believe that when your Nobel Prize winning economist or famous movie actress or film director was there, at that same table, you might have had someone that was just not a star, one of their classmates that maybe didn't barely had money to pay for his coffee. And he might have been at the same table with this actress person I mentioned, who would likely have been from a fairly affluent family. So it among other things, it had an egalitarian magic,
Hmm.
so to say. It didn't, and I'll have joke with you here, but they couldn't care less that an American from the embassy was there. Now, I'm happy that you got a table, but had there not been a table, they would have made you wait just as much as they would have made me wait.
And I would have been happy to wait.
Yeah.
It's really just such an enchanting place. You mentioned kids in the 2020s. I mean, do you think there still is real intellectual debate going on at these places now, or are people going there for the nostalgia or just the convenience because they're between classes at the Presidency College or whatever?
So I actually wasn't there this last trip a couple of months ago, but I would not be surprised if it's population in flux, where you might have a substantial remnant of people going there for these conversations, the original ethos, so to say. I would not be surprised if, along with that, you have a fairly healthy number of young people there to take a picture of their coffee and the turbaned waiters so that it goes on a social media
Right.
feed. I wouldn't be surprised if there are more Western tourists than before now going to that part of the city. This would also not, unlike, let's say, Free School Street or Park Street, this was also not usually a part of the city where we had people from other countries come for the tourist value alone. So these days, because it is a different age and time where people have heard about the coffee house, or there is more tourism of India for the cultural aspects rather than the colonial aspects, there may be more people going to coffee house for reasons other than just the hour-long conversations.
Mhm.
The conversations themselves have likely evolved. I would not be surprised if they're talking about things other than the classical, philosophical, intellectual, cultural things that would have been the mainstay of the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. But that place is remarkably resistant to completely losing its feel. So you're actually putting a thought in my mind. Next time I'm there, I will have to go see what people talk about these days. But I doubt that place has changed dramatically. Other parts of the city, I try to go back. I was in that neighborhood. I walked past the coffee house. I swear to you that other parts of that neighborhood have been essentially the same since I left college, which is 26 years ago.
So you obviously have lived all over the place, but it seems as if, despite all your travels and despite living in the States now, the coffee house and College Street do hold a special place in your heart.
They do. They do. And would you like me to talk about why I feel that? So I
Please.
have, for better or for worse, I've lived in three continents, maybe five or six countries. But so I guess with that coffee house or more so the neighborhood as a whole. And I'm not naturally, I'm very, very not the College Street type. I'm restless. I don't sit in one place for too long. I'm constantly, and even when I was a student there, I was not the kind of person that ever managed to sit for 3 hours and talk without needing to go somewhere else. But for a mix of reasons, some of which have to do with, I guess, the history, that place, life does slow down, time does slow down. And I was there 2 months ago on a 3 week trip to India when time is crazy short because I have 50
Mm.
people to meet and I'm just there
Right.
for 3 weeks. But I remember the afternoon that I spent walking around College Street. And even for a person like me, the only other place I can think of that does this to me is Hawaii. Something in the air makes you slow down and relax and talk to people and not. I managed to not be my American schedule looking Zoom call hopping self for those few hours. I feel it's because people there live at a gentler pace. You might find a bookseller that will talk to you about a book for 30
Mm.
minutes completely without confidence that you're going to buy it. He thinks you might, he thinks you might not. You may or may not end up making the purchase, but this person is not going to rush you over and look for the next customer that is more likely to buy it.
Right.
The pan, would you know what a pan is? A betel leaf with
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So one of my best friends there, apart from the cigarette seller, is a pan seller by the name of Montu. The most fabulous, I mean, the tastiest, most delicious pan. This is pan without tobacco, but he makes what is by far the best pan in all of the city of Calcutta, just off College Square on a tiny little store. And his face lights up. He'll talk to me for 15 minutes while making pan for 50 other people. And there I am feeling uneasy that I'm taking business away
Right.
from him. But he
Right.
doesn't care. He's happy to see me after 2 years. So that place has it helps you connect with the slower, nicer, more relaxed core that we sometimes lose, especially, having lived in the US for 25 odd years.
I think you're right. That's one of the reasons I loved it there so much is because you have to just sort of unplug and
Yeah,
unwind.
yeah, yeah.
I had this wonderful story when I was in Old Delhi years before. This old guy came up to me and just started speaking to me. He said he was a writer and asked where I was from. And when I said I was from Scotland, he started naming off all these British authors. And
Hmm.
we talked for a while. And as I said, I have to leave now. He said, well, tell Enid Blyton hello from me and that she'll be welcome in India anytime she comes, right? And of course, she'd been dead for 20, 30 years at the time.
Did
But
he know that and was he joking or did he think
no, no, he did not know, and
did
he
he do?
wasn't joking. It
Yeah,
was just a sort of, he just wanted to somehow
yeah.
connect with Enid Blyton. But the first time I was on College Street, this experience that you just described to me absolutely happened. I stood in front of this guy's bookstore, and he just wanted to chat. And I was very self-conscious because I didn't know if I was going to buy anything, but I didn't want to waste his time. But he was just
Mm-mm.
talking away,
Mm.
and we had this wonderful conversation. He said, I think I have something for you. And he went off, into the back and he came out with these two books. And
Hmm.
they were both Enid Blyton books. And it was such a strange coincidence. And, you opened them up and some very proud grandfather had written to his granddaughter, hoping that she would enjoy these books. And I've got these books right over there.
They're
Um,
not naughty books, are they?
one of them was an audiobook. Yes, one of
Yes,
them
so
an
I
audio.
grew up reading Noddy. Funny you should mention Enid Blyton. I just was back in my childhood bedroom, and I still haven't dusted them off, but I brought back some of my own Enid Blyton books from 40 years ago.
That's just so wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of them was an audiobook and one of them was the famous five. But and then he and I just sat down and talked, and we spent, I don't know, 30 minutes chatting away. And I bought
Hmm.
the books for,
Hmm.
a lot less than they were worth to me now. But that's just, somebody who loves books can just get lost in
Yeah,
College
yeah, yeah.
Street. Yeah.
And I don't. So my experience with booksellers there, of course, when I used to go there every day, the books I needed were
Right,
textbooks, zoology textbooks. But I do know that people sometimes find these first editions and things that on the Western used book market would sell for 100 or 1,000 times the price
right,
that they get originally sold for on college. Although I believe that the first edition trade is a specialized slice of that street, and the people there that deal with those books know that they're dealing with really valuable antiques. I actually never explored that particular segment of the College Street market. Expensive first editions. Like I said, my dealings were more with people that would give me the best price on a zoology textbook.
right. Yeah, you were there for business.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, Shurjo, I'm being informed that we're about to get kicked off. So, um,
Happy to continue this chat anytime, Adrian.
well,
Just let me know.
wait, in the last few minutes that we have, do you have any more anecdotes or recollections that you'd like to share?
I do, and it is an admission of guilt and shame. So College Street is the only place where I pulled a knife on someone.
Oh my God! Well, you have to explain that.
Yeah, I probably should, right? And so I hope that anyone reading your blog doesn't think of me as a professional criminal. So I was a student politician, and in my years on College Street, I was pretty heavily involved in what you would call the local student politics scene. And we were a party fighting against the ruling party at the time, which meant that I carried a substantial risk of getting beaten up on the streets if I found myself in the wrong place. So, not because I knew how to use one, but because it made me feel more dangerous, I used to carry a knife. And then one night I'm in a cab and I need the cab driver to put me inside Presidency College. If I get dropped on the streets and one of the opponent party student politicians see me, there was a real risk that I might get beaten up.
Wow.
So I asked the cab driver, "Will you drop me inside the college?" And he refused. He says, "No, this is as far as I go. I'm not going any further." So I gently tapped him on the shoulder with that knife. I did not hit him. I tapped him. And I swear he sped up, he dropped me inside. I paid him. I paid him. It was not like I got a free ride out of him. But anyhow, he dropped me inside the college. I was safe. I did not get beaten up. But to this day, that remains the only time I pulled a knife on someone, and it was on College Street. I gave that knife away thereafter. I have never actually, for the record, I have not knifed anyone. It was a teenage thing. Anyway, how does that do for an anecdote?
That's a perfect ending. And yeah, full stop with that, Shurjo.
Okay, Adrian, just let me know if you need me for anything else, okay?
I will definitely do that, and I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great evening.
You too, Adrian. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Ciao.
Okay, bye bye.